Our next artwork by Goya is The Family of Charles IV. Goya became the official royal painter to the King of Spain, and here is his official family portrait of Charles IV. And what we see is the state of Spain at this time. Gone is the golden age of Spain. Spain is seen as a backward and outdated country, both in terms of its government and its treatment of the people. The king and the queen hated each other, and the public hated them. The people of Spain hated the king and queen. Charles IV was incapable, and he was a really poor leader. He was dominated by the incompetent queen, her name Queen Maria Luisa. Oftentimes in public, she would embarrass him by calling him names and insulting him. She openly had lovers. She would be like, that guy is cute. I'm going to make him a duke, and then me and the duke are going to go do some stuff in the office. We're going to talk business. So everybody's just so sick of them. And everybody in Spain had hope for the future in the crown prince, the heir to the throne. His name is Ferdinand. So in this portrait, we see our detestable king and queen. And we see his younger brother. We see his wife, the younger brother's wife. We see their eldest daughter. Here she is. And she got married and she has a baby. Now, as the eldest son, Ferdinand will inherit the throne. Behind Ferdinand, we see the elder sister of Charles IV. We also see the youngest of the princes, two little princes here, and a princess. This woman here, she's missing a face. Who is she? Well, at this time, he had been, Ferdinand had been in negotiations for a bride, and they didn't know who he was going to marry. So this is a kind of filler piece. This type of kind of blank face, where it looks like she's looking away, artists call that a lost profile. So the idea is that we don't know who he's going to marry, but once we figure that out, once the paper's signed, then we'll go back and we'll paint her face. And usually that's what happens. Usually they'll go back in and you never even know that there was a lost profile before. But this one was never finished or never repainted. Spoiler alert, in 1802 he married Maria Antonia of Naples, but she never got her name or her face on there. And then behind, we got Goya himself. And Goya is in the act of painting. He's got this massive canvas. We see the back of it because he's working on it as he looks at the royal family. Oh, very interesting. But this is also Goya's way of showing the state of the union. I said, people hated the king and queen. They were also not a united front. Notice how Goya has depicted them. Do they stand next to each other? No, they don't. There's a literal divide between them, this gap, this fissure. What Goya is speaking of here is this lack of unity between the king and queen, and this divide is divisive for Spain. Also, there's a void of power. There's no real center for them. Instead, we have this open void. Uh-oh, right? And if we were to look at, I can't resist. You know me, I always like a joke. Derp. Yeah, his younger brother's not that smart. If we were to look at feet, why feet, Miss Cortez? Well, they're all standing on the same ground plane, right? They're all standing in the same room. And who is standing closest to us? Is it the king? No, it's Ferdinand. Goya has placed Ferdinand closer to us because Ferdinand is what the people see as the hope for the future. Ferdinand, who has been trained under the understanding of the Enlightenment, he's seen as this new, progressive, fresh blood. He's going to revitalize Spain. He's going to fix the backward nation. He's going to make them up to date. And he is seen as the people's prince. People love Ferdinand. They have so much hope for the future in him. And so Goya places him closer to us because he is closer to us, people of Spain. Goya inserts himself in the background, not just because he has an ego as being, Goya, but also because he's making a callback to the greatness of Spain and the greatness of Velázquez. Velázquez, if you took the Art 102 class, then you would be familiar with Velázquez. Velázquez comes from the Spanish Baroque period, and what we have is this painting here on your left where Velázquez was painting the royal family. We see the king and queen of Spain in the mirror and their daughter here in the foreground. And he puts himself into this portrait of the family, painting the portrait of the king and the queen. Goya wants to make that direct callback. He's like, yeah, I'm just as awesome as Velázquez. Thank you. Now, this portrait seems to tell us the facts, who is in the royal family, but it also is foreshadowing of what's to come. Now, when I say foreshadowing, I don't want you to look at the shadows. That's not the point here. Foreshadowing, as in Goya is seeing that this divide, this void of power, and this desire for Ferdinand is going to bring about a change. In 1808, Ferdinand has had enough, and he plans to overthrow his dad, but he needs help. So he requests the help from Napoleon. What? I know. 1808, Napoleon has just established himself as the Emperor of France. He's ruling it, and Ferdinand says, you know what I need? I need Napoleon's help to defeat my dad. So Ferdinand sends a letter to Napoleon asking for troops to be sent to Spain, and he will use his troops to overthrow his dad, Charles IV. Now, do you think this is a good idea? To ask Napoleon to send troops into your country? No. But Napoleon, he recognizes this as the opportunity that it is. So Napoleon's like, you want me to send troops? You're inviting me into Spain? Yeah, okay, I'll send you some troops. So Napoleon stays back in Spain, but he sends troops down to meet Ferdinand at the border between Spain and France. That is where his parents are staying. And the troops come in, they take the king and queen quickly, it's not even a fight, and lock them up into a castle. They then take Ferdinand and lock him up in the same castle. What? And then the troops continue down into Spain to the capital city of Madrid, where they take the royal palace and kidnap the rest of the royal family, including the young princes and the princess. Now, the people of Spain are like, yay, Ferdinand's here too. Wait, that's not Ferdinand. Wait, that's Napoleon's soldiers. Wait, they're taking our princes and princesses and princess. So you see the young royalty being ripped into the carriages, crying and screaming, and they start to panic and they realize what's happened. Napoleon has taken Spain. And so they rise up in revolt. The revolt of the Spanish people is our next artwork by Goya. Here it is. The title is 3rd of May, 1808. It was painted later in 1814, so that's why for the confusing title. The events that Goya is painting here happened after the French soldiers took the royal family from Madrid on May 3rd, 1808. Do you get it? Okay. What we see is that the Spanish peasants and middle class and the clergy who rose up to fight against the French soldiers have been corralled and are now being massacred one by one by one. This event took place the day after their uprising in Madrid. We see the town itself. In the early morning of May 3rd, the rebels who had fought against the French soldiers are brought out of the city gates and are shot. So this is a horrific moment in history. And this plot to overthrow it goes massively wrong. Just to finish the story, Napoleon defeats the rebels in Spain and puts his brother Joseph as king of Spain. This painting was commissioned the year after Napoleon fell and Joseph was expelled from Spain and the young Ferdinand came back into power. So to honor those Spanish people who had fought and died for his overthrow of his parents and fought the French soldiers, Ferdinand had Goya paint this as a kind of memorial remembrance. We have the wall of death. The French soldiers, they are faceless, mindless, and they shoot the Spanish people. We see a gathering of middle class, working class, and clergymen. This is symbolizing the unity of the Spanish in hopes of Ferdinand, not the French. This chaotic moment here, we see a man stretching out his arms on his knees. He is surrendering. He's wearing white, and his arms are in this kind of open shape. Goya is doing that on purpose because what Goya wants us to do is make a parallel between this young man and Jesus. He's not saying that this guy is Jesus, but Jesus in this kind of crucifix form is meant to symbolize Jesus as a sacrifice. Here, this young man is a sacrifice for this revolution. He's a sacrifice to the greater good of Spain. He is an innocent who has given himself for Ferdinand, for the hope of something greater for Spain. He's being murdered by the French. This is horrific. We see blood pooling and dripping down into our space. We see people fear and cower. And it's haunting and we can't turn away. What's that vocabulary word? The sublime. Yep, the sublime. Things are not behaving rationally. That's what this chaos of this moment is. What? Why are you here? You're supposed to help us. Why are you shooting at blah, blah, blah. Even the light from the lantern isn't behaving rationally. This is happening in the early morning hours. This big box of light here is a lantern. And rather than expelling the light on all four equal sides as it should, the light is focusing on this group of slaughtered people. The light and the darkness onto the French soldiers. So we see it not only as almost highlighting the figures, putting them in this dramatic bright light to help us see them, but also they are enlightened. They have the better knowledge than these mindless French soldiers. And we don't need to see their faces. They are numb. They are monotonous. They are just robots of death for us. It's intense, right? I know. It's gruesome. Just to give you some details here. Now, as I said, this was painted after when Ferdinand was reinstated. And I hate to tell you this, Ferdinand was just as much a disappointment. The people saw Ferdinand as being this hope for a new future, and when he came back, he was bitter and angry, and he was worse to the people of Spain. He reinstated the Spanish Inquisition, which was a religious torture of people, and it was just a very big disappointment.